remember, I mean, you probably do. Do you remember your first recruiting job? And then how did you get into recruiting? Like, did you know about recruiting for a while? Maybe you had friends or family that was in recruiting beforehand, but walk me through, like, how did you find your first job? And was it just a cold kind of application that you filled out online, or how did it work out?
Yeah, it's kind of like a combination. So I studied psychology in college. I went to NYU, and I knew from the point I graduated that I was definitely interested in like working with people, getting to talk to people, like very human centered work. But what I did learn from my degree is that I'm not necessarily super interested in like the clinical and like research components that psychology trained me for. So I started looking into jobs when I graduated that had like a people element to it. And that's kind of what got me into my first role, which was a recruiter at a translation company. And my role there was recruiting freelance translators. So it's the biggest translation company in the world. It's a huge organization, like thousands of employees. I guess what I took away from that role was that I really enjoy like the hunt of recruiting, or like the challenge of it, finding like really niche roles and having to find somebody that like fits into this small box.
Mhm.
And from there, I knew I was really into recruiting, but what I knew I also really wanted to do was get into the tech industry and the startup industry. I kind of got the sense pretty early on in my career that big corporations weren't really for me, and that I do enjoy the small, tight-knit, collaborative, aspect of being in a smaller org or startup org. And so I was really excited when I got my first role at Teachable. That was like my leg into the startup world and the tech world, where I started as a sourcer. And when I left, I was at just technical recruiting level. But I think each recruiting role I've had, I've been able to take away a lot from, whether that be how to be a better recruiter or just learning more about the industry itself, which is, super important in our type of work. But that was kind of my journey into recruiting, and here I am.
Yeah, super cool. So you had a degree in psychology, which I want to ask you just straight up, after being a recruiter for now almost 6 years, do you find that studying psychology like helped you be a better recruiter, or it was kind of maybe
Not
it
at all.
just you could have just made up the answer like,
Yeah.
yeah, Preston, you know what? I think if you want to be a recruiter, you got to have a degree in psychology, but I appreciate your honesty.
I think recruiting is like a pretty unique role in that, like, I really think you can kind of come from any background as long as it's like where you want to be. I will say that I think recruiting is meant for people that like interacting with people and communicating and dealing with people on a very, human level. For folks that just like to like get their job done, be in front of a computer, not talk to people, which a lot of people, are like that. I would say recruiting is not necessarily the path for you, but I think any kind of degree could be useful. I don't think any specific, degree would kind of get you here.
I mean, have you ever met a recruiter that did not like interacting with people just in your career?
I have actually.
Do they
I think if
exist?
you asked them, they would be like, I really do like talking to people, but my own impression of them has been like, do you though? But I think that you have to, like, I don't think anybody would be happy in the field. So I do have to concede to, like, if they say they like dealing with people, then I think they must, because otherwise I don't see them staying in this field for very long.
Yeah, me too. So I would love to talk about Teachable a little more and of course your current job, but I'm fascinated. So this translation company, did you apply to be like a recruiter, or did you kind of move into that role?
I applied. The title wasn't recruiter at the time,
Mm,
because a lot of the recruiting I was doing was external, so hiring freelancers as opposed to internal, like, employees, and it was
mm.
strictly for translators. So I wasn't looking for like tech or, product or anything like that. I did apply for this position that I saw was entry level and would consist of me basically searching and getting people interested who have like translation background. So I would reach out and I would get them certified. They'd have to take a little test to prove they know the language. And then I would get them into the system so that they would
Mm.
be eligible to get work to do translations.
Gotcha. And it was at this experience, it was like your first foray into recruiting. Like, you know what? I think recruiting is pretty cool. I can see myself having a career in it. And then you said that you also had an interest to kind of explore more the technology industry, maybe smaller companies, fast growth companies. And that's kind of the real impetus of why you left. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say
Mm.
so. I think a lot of what really excited me about that role is that I was tasked with finding translators for very like obscure and specific languages that there aren't a lot of speakers in for like medical reasons and things. But there aren't a ton of, native speakers. So it would be really challenging to find translators in certain languages, and going out and kind of hunting them down and getting them interested and onboarding them and all of that kind of got me hooked into recruiting. And that was kind of my aha moment of I definitely enjoy this work, but I think I would like to test out a different field. And yeah, that's what brought me to Teachable.
What was your day-to-day like as kind of a recruiter at a fast growth company like Teachable?
So I think I got a really good like career ladder at Teachable. I started as a sourcer, which consisted of me, having one or two jobs that I was focused on and just outreach like all day. Basically, once I started to get candidates that were interested, I showed a lot of interest in not just passing them off to the recruiter to handle. I really wanted to be a full cycle recruiter. I talked to my boss and I made that very clear. Like, I don't want to just be a sourcer. I'm happy that that's my title and that's what my main job is, but I really want to, take a candidate through the full process. And luckily enough for me, that was an option, which I think is another great part of being at a startup versus a company. You kind of get to merge into the roles that you want to be, taking on. But I guess my day to day consisted of talking to hiring managers, giving them updates, syncing on candidate profiles, making sure I'm on the right track. Sometimes I would like to, at the start of a search, sit down with a hiring manager, just go through like a handful of profiles, making sure I'm on the right track. And if not, I would need to, change course a little bit. Then after, doing a bunch of calls, getting candidates to on-site, it would be the same sort of touching base with the hiring managers, making sure the candidates that I'm bringing in are good fits. And I loved getting to see through to the offer phase. At the beginning of my time there, I would shadow in on the offer calls. And then as I got more confident, I would lead them with my manager shadowing me, and then made it to the point where it was like a piece of cake. I was able to handle them on my own. I would do them every day, and I kind of got the gist of how it works. That kind of negotiation game. But yeah, that was my day to day, I would say, for the most part.
Thank you for sharing that. And then I think one question that we get a lot about fast growth companies is like, wow, like, Jackie joined, for example, Teachable when they were 70, she left when they were 200. So, did Jackie actually end up like hiring like 100 people herself, right? Like a lot of people can think about that. So like
I wish.
I'd be speaking with like, you'd be like the top
Yeah,
0.00001%. So for people who are just unfamiliar with like startups and just how it works, or just internal teams, like, you and the team probably hired a little over 150 people by the time that you left. So what are, like, aside from obviously your direct efforts and the team members' efforts that are obviously doing a lot of outreach to the candidates, like what are other kind of great tools that you guys use that just help build the pipeline and make some great hires?
Yeah, so I guess I would say some of the tools I love and used at both Teachable and my current job are some of the, pretty well-known hiring platforms like Hired. I am a big Hired user. I love Underdog and huge on LinkedIn. I mean, I would be lost without LinkedIn. I think that's my 99% of my day spent on LinkedIn, and just like networking in general, going to meetups and events like that, where you can kind of, stealthily make introductions and connect with people, and then they think of you when they're looking for their next role, and they don't even necessarily know that that's even the case when you meet. Just, I would say networking is, it's really big, making in-person interactions. And one of my favorite techniques to getting hires is referrals. I think nobody's going to refer somebody to the company that they think is like not going to be a team player, is not going to be like an asset to the company. I think referrals are just really great at bringing in talent that's both like an asset to the company from a skills perspective, but also like a culture fit. So I always love to leverage that as well.
I love referrals,
Me
networks,
too.
word of mouth. Best way to get any candidate or any lead or anything,
100%.
right? Because you
Yeah,
have that like extra degree of credibility that's already been established by the mutual friend, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Love it. I love it. And yeah, you mentioned other great platforms, Underdog, Hire, and very familiar with all those. That's super cool. And is there a reason why maybe, for example, like you left, like people could be wondering, oh, I mean, you've done so well there. Why not just like, hunker in, put your heads down and just try to maybe grow with Teachable?
Yeah.
Like what was kind of your thought process at that time?
Start by saying I love Teachable, and it was a very difficult decision to leave in the first place. I actually wasn't even looking to leave, but I got reached out to by you actually about this really cool opportunity, a very unique opportunity actually, that I don't know that I would have left Teachable for something that I wasn't like very intrigued by and very excited by, like this opportunity. So if you came to me with something else, I would have been like, okay, thanks, but I don't know.
Ignore.
But right. But I think this kind of this role and what we're doing here, I think is one of the most unique and biggest growth opportunities that I've had in my career. So for context to listeners, JustWorks Labs is a brand new startup. We're an independent company. However, we're owned and funded by JustWorks. So we're something of a part of JustWorks, but we're kind of like a startup within this well-established company. So JustWorks is at 1,000 employees. They're large, they're doing really well. The business is in a really good spot. And that gave sort of leeway to come up with a new product that's going to complement the existing platform. And we realized the best way to do that is to start our own company where we can be our first customer and make sure that the product that we're building is, as good as it possibly can be. So that was sort of the idea as to why we're a separate company instead of, within JustWorks. But, what made this opportunity really unique is when I joined, or when I started, we were 5 employees in this company. And while we do have the resources of JustWorks at our disposal, in certain areas and when we need them, for the most part, we are separate and independent. So we don't share their recruiting team. All of our engineers, we build from the ground up. We're not using the existing product or anything like that. So it's kind of like a clean slate. And I never gotten the opportunity to work this early on at a company. And a lot of the fear that I would have had at working at a company this early on is, what about there being a space in the market and where's the money coming from? And what if it doesn't last? But a lot of that fear was kind of put to rest by having JustWorks at our back. And JustWorks is a great company and a well-known company. I didn't have anything big to worry about. And it was just this really cool opportunity to be the first recruiter in this company to grow this whole team. We have aggressive hiring plans. We're hiring all over the board. When we started, we were 5, now we're 20, which seems small, but over the last year, it feels like a really big accomplishment for us. And we're continuing to grow. We're hiring like crazy. And I think it's immensely satisfying to get to make as big of an impact as I am in this role. Not to say that I didn't feel like that in my previous role, but the level to which I feel the impact I'm making here is just, it's amazing. And I love kind of getting to be the leader of the recruiting side, the first one to do it, the first one to make the recruiting process and come up with like procedures and our onboarding plan and all of it. It's been a really rewarding opportunity for sure.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it. And a couple of things I want to touch on is I want to reiterate that you weren't even just actively looking when I reached out to you. And I think what really ultimately helped you make that decision is it was truly at that time like a really unique opportunity, just a startup within a startup, and early stage startup without like the issues of most early stage startups. What would your advice be to the candidates that find themselves in a very unique opportunity where they're like, wow, for the first time in a long time, I can ask for like a salary that's 20, 30, 40% higher than what I would normally ask. And maybe my, experience on paper wouldn't match that. So like, surely for someone like yourself who sees a lot of inbound, you're talking to a lot of candidates every single week, you're probably like, wow, this person has an amazing background, but oof, you look at the salary ask, like, what do you do? Like, do you just, I guess, if you're really excited, would you have a conversation with them? Like, hey, like, this is like a realistic range, like, take it or leave it type of thing, or
totally.
like, what would you do in that situation? Or what would your advice be for people in that situation?
I think it's always fair to ask. Like, you have a number in mind, like ask. And what's the worst that can happen? We say like, we can't get there. This is where we can get. Is that still interesting to you? And that's kind of how I go about when I see candidates with numbers that I don't know that we'll be able to reach or that I think are over what I would consider them on paper. I still want to talk to them, of course. If it's like wildly out of reach, maybe I don't know, I would be less quick to jump on a call with them, but I don't
Mhm.
think it would stop me. I think it would just be something I would want to make sure to discuss with them on that first call and be like, look, I noticed this is the number you put on that you're looking for. To be honest, this is the number we're able to give you. And I would try to kind of fluff up the opportunity. Like, this is, why I think this is a great opportunity. And I always like to remind candidates that the number that you take get it going into a job is not your permanent salary by any means. It's just your starting salary.
Mhm.
Every company I know of does performance reviews of some sort. And I think right now, in the name of staying competitive, companies have to retain their top talent. They will give you, a raise or a promotion in the future once you've earned it. So I try not to I try to encourage people not to let the number get to them that much when it's only, the beginning of your journey here, and you can always, move your way up if you do hard work. Obviously can't ever guarantee a promotion, but it's within the cards if are a good employee.
I agree.
But
I agree.
yeah,
I think having people focus on the long term as well and the potential that your income can grow into is certainly very, very key. And just being honest with each other and
yeah,
see if an understanding can be met. But I think that's really cool, really, really insightful for someone like yourself that's obviously at a company that's growing very, very fast in this market condition. So I know we're running out of time, but I want to ask you, for people who I guess just want to just now, they're listening to this and they're inspired, they're excited to kind of, again, follow your footsteps and work at not one, but multiple tech companies. If you were to give maybe like one big advice that you give to other people, like what would it be?
I guess if I had to give one piece of advice, it would be, I don't know, not to let your fear dissuade you from taking on a new opportunity, to go for it, see it through, go through the interview process, talk to the team. And also, I guess the biggest piece of advice I would say is go listen to your gut. Your instincts may not be right 100% of the time, but even still, I think you always learn something from an opportunity, even if it ends up being something that you wouldn't necessarily want to repeat,
Mhm.
or a negative opportunity. But I think your instincts have a lot to say, and you shouldn't ignore them. And going for the opportunities that even you might on paper think like, no, that's like too much for me, that's too much responsibility, that's intimidating. Just go for it, see what it's like, give it a shot. And the interview process will tell you a lot about what the position is going to be like, I guess to say. So ask lots of questions, follow your instincts at the end of the day.